Welcome, one and all, to the newest edition of Draft Savages, the Football Savages NFL Draft podcast. I'm your host, Seth Cox. With me tonight, my co-host, Justin Higdon in snowy Chicago. What's up, Justin?
Not too much, just staying inside, staying off the streets.
And Justice is in his funeral garb with his Packers and Ducks. What's up, Justice?
Man, I woke up at like 5 and just see like my timeline talking about friends, and then people taking shots at me. I had no idea what was going on. So that's pretty much what my day's been so far.
And of course, our guest tonight, he was on the ground in Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl. So we of course wanted to get him on sometime, and we took advantage of his access at the Senior Bowl. Ethan Hammerman. Ethan, how's it going?
Oh, sorry. It's going pretty well. I'm very, very happy to be on. I'm also apologize for starting that entire Friends conversation because I think I may have started that off by saying that it was a trash show.
You were correct.
So I apologize for that.
My wife will fight you, so just don't ever talk about that in front of her. Anyways, we're here tonight to talk about the 2015 NFL Draft, and we kind of got it kicked off a couple weeks ago with Matt Miller of Bleacher Report, and now it's really the fun time where draft reports and people start dropping their their scouting reports. Sorry, I'm laughing at some of these takes on here, and of course the biggest thing that we'll see is the change of big boards and how those are going to differ over the next several months as we slowly creep towards April 30th and May 1st in Chicago. So we'll get started with Ethan and just what was the overall vibe down there in Mobile? Not as much talent as last year, obviously, but what was the overall vibe?
I think that people left the Senior Bowl pretty optimistic about the talent. I think people were surprised by a lot of the smaller school players. They really played well. And there were some sort of like weaker positions that I think when you look at the talent that was brought to Mobile, they got a lot stronger just because you saw some of the depth that was there. I think tight end is one of those positions. Daniel Jeremiah told me Clive Walford was probably the best player in either team's practice. He honestly might have proved out some of the tape on him this week. And I think they also got some other nice pieces. Casey Pierce from Kent State, Nick Boyle from Delaware, both sort of like took a lot of people by surprise this week. And I think cornerback as well, with some of the declarations and the performance of the guys like Kevin White from TCU down here, Steven Nelson, and I guess also another one who sort of jumped out to me was Josh Shaw from USC. There's a lot of talent at that position as well that I don't think people realized was there before. So I think that the middle rounds are beginning to fill up and become a lot more interesting.
Ethan, is Carl Davis a first-round pick now? I mean, people are talking about this dude like in the 20 range. And I thought Trinka Passat was coming into the league, to be totally honest.
Well, Trinka Passat is a trash player.
That's a hot take.
When he actually has to face decent talent. At least that's sort of what I gathered from this week. I don't think I saw him win a single one-on-one battle. Davis was the best defensive lineman this week on definitely the North team, probably either team. He was better than Shelton. He just sort of like needs to play a 5-tech role and needs to sort of get more consistent leverage. But he has Muhammad Wilkerson potential if he can sort of get that leverage more consistent. I have a feeling that he's going to end up going a lot higher than where I originally had him rated. I was rewatching his tape, and I still don't completely see it, but for now, I think early second round is probably his floor. Like, he did a really good job in Mobile.
I think it's fate that he ends up on Green Bay, Justice. We went through it in our group text the other day, the number of Hawkeyes on the Packers roster. So I think he'll just enjoy Carl Davis.
It's going to be that, and then Shelton and Shane Ray are going to end up being math rushers, and I'm going to have to delete every single tweet that I've ever sent about them. Yeah. This class, man, it's going to be the death of me.
It's a rough year for you.
Well, obviously, with the Senior Bowl, there's a lot of talk and a lot of a lot of different things that happen, but the main thing that comes up every all-star circuit is who made money. It usually ends up just being a hot take fest on the practices and who stood out in practices, and then all of a sudden, that guy made money. But for you, who impressed you? Maybe not just in the practices, but overall, who impressed you, Ethan?
I mean, Carl Davis did impress me a lot. I wasn't a big fan before. I think that he's going to be somebody who's rising in the process. I think if we're talking math rushers, Gabe Wright from Auburn looked really, really good in practice, and the Jaguars coaches were hyping him up whenever they could. And he's a really explosive guy. He looked better than Grady Jarrett to me, and Grady Jarrett also looked pretty good, but I think that Wright is a little more consistent, has some more projectability there. I actually gave him an early second-round grade as well early in the process, and I might revisit that as I continue to watch tape on him. Jaquiski Tart from Samford looked really good to me. I think he's someone who's going to rise in the process because his safety class isn't very good. And even Landon Collins, some of the hype on him seems to be dying down a bit. So he's somebody who I think could definitely rise. Tyler Lockett is pretty much uncoverable if you're not sort of attuned to his double moves. Players couldn't stay with him all week. He impressed me a lot. And I guess in terms of small school guys, Ali Marpet from Hobart came out of absolute nowhere, and the only player who I saw beat him was Danny Shelton. I think that he might have lost one other time. I think Justice actually videoed it. It might have been, was it Anderson? Somebody else beat him at some point, but I think I missed it.
Yeah, I think someone like crossed his face or something like that. I mean, I guess the one guy I would ask about is Donovan Smith. I mean, this is a dude who was kind of on our radar in the preseason. Nick Page, who writes for Draft Breakdown, is a huge Penn State fan. And he was just like, don't watch him right now. He's not very good. Dude ends up declaring he's one of the 10 guys with a degree that declared, so he's at the Senior Bowl. I mean, from what I've seen, like people tweet out, and what I saw on the broadcasts of the practices on NFL Network, I mean, everyone seemed pretty impressed with him. I mean, what'd you come away thinking about Donovan Smith after this week?
This is the weird thing about the Senior Bowl because. And I think this is also why if you go, you should try to have a team of people and you all focus on one position to watch. Every time I watched him, he got beat. So I have a really negative impression of Donovan Smith. I saw him get beat like a drum by all the pass rushers. He just wasn't fast enough to compensate against any of the pass rushers whenever I watched him. In the run game, he looked fine, but I'm a little bit scared about how his speed can translate to the next level because I just didn't see it. Maybe I'm just wrong, and I missed all the steps where he looked good, but I can only speak to what I saw, and I wasn't that impressed.
Ethan, mentioning Smith, he actually looked pretty decent during the game itself. I didn't hone in on him, but I was actually really surprised because I've seen a lot of him throughout college. But, I was never impressed with him, but then during the game I thought he was actually having some good reps. But I wanted to ask you about Ali Marpet again. I know he played tackle at Hobart and apparently just dominated to the point where it's almost not even worth watching. But where do you see his fit on the pro level? I've heard center, I've heard guard. Interested to know your take after seeing the practices.
I think he's a guard. I think that's where he's going to end up. Some people said center, but he doesn't know how to snap the ball, so I don't think he's going to be a center. I think he'll be a guard. And if he had it his way, I think he'd be a New York Giant because that's his favorite team and he wants to play with Justin Pugh. So I don't know why, but I think he'll end up being a Giant.
Outside of the practices, did you watch the game on Saturday?
I watched bits and pieces of it. I actually had to have a conversation with another football savage when I got back to New York, Ben Natan. So I hung out with him during much of the game, and we didn't watch it. But I watched, I would say, probably the second quarter.
So one of the things that I always wonder, and I'm going to get all three of your opinions on this, and we'll start with Ethan. How much of the game matters?
I can tell you that every single person of note other than Emery Hunt was gone from Mobile by the end of the day on Thursday, or early Friday morning. I don't think people put that much stock in the game at all, which I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it's sort of like how much can you actually tell about a person when they are playing in a game where the scheme was literally thrown together the week before, and it's pretty much just like a patchwork quilt. It isn't really sort of like a scheme that's actually coherent. So I think the opinion in Mobile is that it's not very important.
Justin, what kind of percentage, because I saw you talking about that earlier, and we'll get into that later, but what kind of percentage would you put that on your grades?
The performance in the game itself,
Yeah.
probably like less than 1%. I mean, it's like Ethan was saying, it's an all-star game. It's unfamiliar teammates, unfamiliar coaches. Some guys are really going to struggle in that scenario, and it could end up, I think, causing some recency bias. I know Ty Sambrailo really didn't look great on Saturday, and I think that was some carryover from the practices. But I'm not going to just lower my grade on him because of that. I might have to take another look and see maybe what was the problem. I know he got called for a false start hold on Saturday. But overall, like, it just doesn't seem like it should be that important. I think I like to use the All-Star games to get an idea of, like, who to get another look at, or maybe, just kind of see a small school guy, how he competes. But I think as time goes by, I put less stock into it, and especially the game itself.
Justice, when you look at this this All-Star kind of circuit, what comes out of it seems to be more what a player can't do than what a player can do. So does that make a difference in how you evaluate that?
Well, I mean, you put them in certain situations, right? So it's like the one-on-one drills between pass rushers and offensive linemen. I mean, that leans towards the pass rushers every single time. So, I mean, you just kind of got to understand what the situation is, and that's another data point on the evaluation. But it's not the end-all be-all or anything like that.
When you look at the other side of the coin, Ethan, and who kind of got exposed this week as much as you can in practices and an all-star game, who were you least impressed with?
I think Justin sort of mentioned him. Tyson Browlow did not look good to me at all. He has a really annoying hitch when he comes up off the snap that I noticed almost every time he would do it, and I was actually pointing out to some of the other guys who I was with, sort of saying, like, watch him. He takes a second every single time, and I saw it on tape too, and it was even more pronounced in person, and something he's going to need to work on if he's going to improve. But also, I just wasn't very impressed by his movement, his arm length. He had some major issues there. Who else wasn't I impressed by? Devin Smith didn't impress me very much, although I think it was a lot because the other receivers did a really good job, and I sort of wanted to be impressed more by him because Justin Hardy lit it up, and Tyler Lockett hit it up, and Jamison Crowder played really well, and he sort of just like languished, which was a little bit disappointing. I guess one other player who I was hoping for a bit more for, or more from, I guess, would be... Yeah, I think otherwise I was pretty much up to par, actually. I mean, my expectations were pretty much met by mostly every player there, other than those two. I guess Shelton, because he didn't dominate like people thought he would. But otherwise.
How about TJ Clemmings? That was another guy I heard that people were kind of not impressed with coming in, expecting him to play like a top 15 guy.
I think people misunderstood his tape, because to me, whenever I watched him on tape, he doesn't have footwork, but he has great punch, and he wins with his punch. And to me, a lot of the projection for him in the first round, and I had a late first on him, was that you bet on the punch, and you hope he can learn the footwork like a lot of other guys have. So that's what he showed in Mobile. He didn't do great when he didn't get sort of his hands on a guy really quickly, but when he did, he dominated. I'll say one guy who beat him a lot was Dion Barge from Penn State. That was a Penn State guy who actually impressed me a lot more this weekend. He beat him at least 6 times in practice, which I really liked. I sort of valued that a lot. So I think Clemmings, to me, his stock didn't really change this week because I sort of saw the same player I saw on tape.
So what's your whole take on? I mean, if you were picking Danny Shelton, where would you take him?
Right now, I'd take him in the second round. Um, there was a rumor in Mobile he was going to go as high as number 5 to the Redskins.
Oh
If
my
that
God,
happened,
please.
that would be one of the more
Dog.
surprising picks that I can remember.
Listen to me. This makes sense because for some reason, the Redskins really like taking guys who are statistically good. Guys like David Amerson, guys like Trent Murphy. So if they want to spend that top 5 pick on Danny Shelton, God bless them.
It seems to me that the league thinks he's a first round lock. So
Man,
I
so
think
like
if you're going for a mock draft for accuracy, Danny Shelton should probably be put in your first round with Penn at this point in time. I will say that from what I saw from him, like, he was okay in practice. He has decent bursts. He got stood up way too much. He's still not very good when he has to take on a double team. He's a personality. I was saying this to somebody on a different podcast, but I'm pretty sure the only time that I saw Danny Shelton wearing pants in public was at the practice. He was wearing a skirt the rest of the time. He has multiple skirts. I think it might be a Samoan thing. I'm not entirely sure, but he's a character in the locker room. He's going to be a really interesting piece in the locker room. He's going to kill interviews, I think, too. He's a really smart guy. But he's just an interesting player. And it'll be cool to see where he falls. He seems like a nice guy. I just don't think he should go number 5 overall.
Speaking of, these Washington, defensive players, Holy Kagaha kind of had a good week. I mean, I saw some people talking about stuff. Brian Perez is a huge fan of his. I think Brian even has him as like his top pass rusher or something like that, but like a first round lock. I'm not sure if I go to that extent, but I mean, Kagaha looked good in everything that I saw. What do you think about him?
Well, I had a special Kikaha moment where I was taping something for eDraft with Luke Inman and Dan Hope and I believe Ian Wharton. And we were the only people on the field. It was about 30 minutes after practice. And Kikaha comes on by himself and just starts practicing rips and drops and pass rush moves alone in the end zone. Just by himself for 20 minutes. Just ripping, just like trying to work on his craft. And you can tell that the guy is very passionate about what he does. He should never, ever, ever drop into coverage. He was awful at it all week. He got beat by all the tight ends regularly whenever he dropped into coverage because they were playing him as a linebacker. But I'm getting it more now as a pass rusher. And also I think that can I put a plug in for Process the Process? Because he was on Process the Process this week with Josh Norris, and he sort of talked about his mentality as a pass rusher, and it was brilliantly done. Talking about how he tries to make it so that the offensive tackle, doesn't have hands anymore. You can't block him if you don't have your hands. And his hand usage was great all week as well. So he's somebody who's good.
How much of that is the judo background, you think? I mean, I read an interesting article about that, and it sounds like a lot of that, the hand fighting, quote unquote, is because of that judo background.
Yeah, it was funny because in the podcast I mentioned, he actually said that he didn't think it was because of the judo background, but I definitely think it comes to bear. He has that sort of experience of using the other guy's weight against him, and he's able to use that leverage really effectively when he's a pass rusher. So I think it comes to bear for sure. I'd probably have, at this point, a second round grade on him. I'm not ready to put him in round 1 yet because I think there are some other edge guys who are a little bit more explosive, a little bit healthier. But he's somebody who I think the Jets would love to get in round 2, and they could totally mold him in that Bulls defense and make him really scary.
Well, one of the things that I've thought about, and I'll get your guys' opinion on this, is when a guy can rush the passer, and we talked about this with Shelton last week and the 30 to 40% of snap guys, but when that guy is 30-40% coming off the edge as a pass rusher, does that up his value as opposed to 30 to 40% as a run stopper? And I know the answer is yes, but I mean, does that up his value from a round 2 type guy like we all had Shelton to putting Kikaha in like round 1 for you, Justice?
I mean, kinda. Like, I'm a guy who's like totally fine with taking Vic Beasley like top 5. You know, I was a Bruce Irvin guy. Like, I'm fine with just being like, hey, this guy rushes the passer, and that's like a definitive trait that you need to win football games. And you know, if he's not a good run defender, that's fine. We can pull off street free agents that are veterans, and fill them in those roles. Like, as long as you can have a nice rotation going on, you should be fine. So, I mean, yeah, I think I probably have like a mid 2 on Kikaha right now. When I went through my edge rankings and things like that, I have like a mid 2 on him. But I mean, I really liked him. I mean, I wrote that piece on Draft Breakdown about him earlier in the summer because I was like, hey, this guy is like kind of insane. Like, the way he uses his tech is really good. I mean, coached under Peterson. You know, he's kind of like DeMarcus Lawrence, like all over again. And I could totally see him going in that same type of range.
If his knees weren't made of paper mache, Ethan, would he be higher on most people's boards?
I think on some he might be. On mine, he'd probably be around the same because I'm still a little bit skeptical because I don't think his burst is great, and I think also I don't want to put too much credence into what I saw this past week because I don't want to overcorrect my past rankings of him that I had seen throughout the season. Because even though we had a lot of sacks, I still saw some issues in terms of him playing sort of upper echelon left tackles, and I'm a little bit nervous about that. But I definitely think that if he was healthier, he would probably be exactly where DeMarcus Lawrence was, late first, early second, and because of that, it'll probably knock him down about half a round.
When you look at the quarterbacks from this week and just how bad they were they as bad as advertised, or were there? So yeah, was there anything passable, or are these guys all career backups and going to be out of the league soon?
I wanted them to impress me so much more than they actually did. I mean, the sad thing was that Garrett Grayson actually was probably my best quarterback this week, and he wasn't that bad. He was just pretty inconsistent. I don't think that he was done any favors by the fact, he's sort of like thrown into this new scheme that he didn't have a ton of experience with, and he sort of just had to go at it blind. But he had some really nice moments. He made some really nice passes. Day 2 especially, I thought he had a really good day. Bryce Petty had a decent time, but he was awful during the game. And he's so old. The Rams were sniffing around him, though, which intrigued me a lot. I think that could be an interesting fit. Blake Sims was the disappointment, or one of the big disappointments for me. He came in really overweight. Like, when you go to the weigh-in, which is still an interesting experience in its own right, but when you go, like, most of the guys, they're pretty defined. They have pretty good bodies. Blake Sims had, he had a 0-pack, full tummy, as we like to say. He looked like a frat boy. And he was just inconsistent all week. I mean, he has some talent for sure. I think there's probably something there if he wants to make it happen, but I'm not convinced that, you don't show up to a job interview hungover. And I'm not convinced that he's sort of prepared correctly for this. Sean Mannion is trash. Brian Bennett is trash. And is that all of them? Yeah, that's all of them. Is Nick Marshall switched to cornerback, which was a good decision, by the way.
So hold on, let's talk about the weigh-in real fast. So last year we heard people doing like cat calls when Logan Thomas went up there. Who are like the impressive guys that went up there?
The winner of the weigh-in
was it the Yale running back? Because the Yale running back he looks stacked. I have no idea who this kid is other than what I saw on the broadcast. And homie's like with his like shirt like tucked in, and I was just like, this dude's a hoss, man. This dude's like trucking over these guys in practice. He looks wild.
Yeah, and they moved him to fullback, and they played him at running back during the game. It made me really happy because he was a great running back at Yale. He actually led them over to wins over Division 1A opponents. I mean, they beat Army pretty much because of Varga, and he won the weigh-in for sure. He just looked like he looked like a bodybuilder. He was the most yoked person I think I've ever seen at the combine, or one of them for sure. And he actually did a good job in practice too. He's somebody who, if you get him on your team, he's going to improve week over week, and he's going to run 4.5 at 229 pounds probably, which is pretty good. So I think that is a 5th-round pick. I mean, considering the running backs that we've seen go around that range, he can be a pretty good value for your team. I'd say some other guys who were impressive. Devontae Davis was starting off so well this week. He had a really good weigh-in, and then he just sort of fell off the face of the earth because he got injured the first day of South practice, which really was too bad. I was right in front of him when he got hurt. It was a shame. But I thought he had a really good weigh-in. I thought Carl Davis had a really good weigh-in as well. But I honestly, I wasn't paying that much attention to the weigh-ins, if I'm being completely honest. But the Varga thing, there were people whistling in the crowd. It was swoop. It was born, and then it was up. Now we're all awake. He was also the last North person, so people are getting ready to move on, and he just sort of stole the stage.
Hey, real quick, back to Danny Shelton. He was a guy that I know I read people said after he weighed in at 343, he gave a fist pump, and he seemed pretty excited about his weight. The word was that he had played their last game at 362, I think. So it's a pretty significant weight loss. Did he look like he's the guy that's going to keep that off? Is that something that's sustainable, or are we talking about a guy who's going to have to be on a program a weigh-in program constantly once he gets to the pro level?
I'll be honest, he looked like his body looked maxed out at the 343, so I can't imagine how it worked with the 360. He looked pretty you're not getting that much more on there, unless it's just in the waist.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about that.
Yeah, there are a lot of reasons that I'm concerned about Danny Shelton. He should have impressed me more than he did. Another guy who also, the one thing that sort of jumped out at me the entire way in that I actually found helpful was Owa for UCLA. His hips are awful. He doesn't have hips. The way he walks with his entire body sort of, his upper body carries his legs.
He's are we talking about Vernon Gholston now?
A little bit. I mean, no, it's actually a little bit scary because he always had double hip surgeries, and it showed up to me in practice. I would never, ever let him play edge unless it's sort of in a wide 9 where he can just run forward because he can't bend. I would never trust him to bend in the NFL. Ever.
When you talk about the players that were there, let's talk about the 2 players that weren't there that took a little bit of heat. I don't know if it was just on Twitter or if it was overall, so that's why I want to talk to you about being on the ground and all. What was the talk of Mariota and Hundley not showing up in Mobile?
Well, the talk about Mariota was that Wisenhunt called him at the last second to come, and Mariota said no because he wasn't ready, and also it came out later he had an injury. So I understand why he didn't come. I mean, if you're coming there on 1 day of preparation, you probably have more to lose than to gain. So I don't give him too much grief on that. I think Hundley probably could have helped his stock if he had come, because the guy could have thrown to some really good receivers. I think it would have been the North team, correct? I guess it would have been on South. Because it was on South. So either way, he would have had really good receivers to throw to. I think that it would have shown that he's a competitor. And I think a lot of questions on him are sort of, does he think he's above a lot of the people he plays with? Or a lot of the people he's going to be teammates with? I know that was a question that I've heard a lot from UCLA people. And I don't think that he dispelled that at all. I mean, he's still my QB3 for sure, and I think that he's going to go pretty high in the draft when it's all said and done just because there's nothing behind him. But I don't think it would have hurt him to come if he felt like the risk was worth it.
Justice, you're kind of in in tune with what goes on at Oregon. Um, what have you heard about Mariota's decision not to go? And he didn't seem to get called out as much as Hundley, but there was definitely some questions about it.
Yeah, actually, what I heard this week, and it was from someone down in Mobile, was that like Savage kind of like told him like, hey, you have your invite, but like you can say no. Like it was almost like an awkward situation where like Mariota's just so nice that like he kind of like didn't want to let anyone down and like say no, but he knew like as far as like his agent gave him information or like the people around him because he doesn't have an agent. Like people around him were like, yeah, you probably shouldn't go and things like that. So he like turned it down, but like hesitantly because he doesn't like want to let anyone around him down at all. I hadn't heard about the AC joint injury until basically when it became public. So I have no idea about that. I mean, we saw in that national championship game where he landed on that shoulder and stuff like that. So I mean, it's no surprise. Yeah, like you can pinpoint when it happened. But that information wasn't public. Yeah, like I said, I mean, it just sounded like he was just kind of a dude who just like shyly said no. And then Wizenhunt called him. Yeah, I don't know, like if like I see a lot of people like talking about him and saying like he's not a competitor and things like that. If the only way he doesn't throw at the combine is if he's legitimately hurt or if he's getting extended information from maybe he'll sign with an agent by then. But it sounds like he's the type of guy who like actually like wanted to like compete and things like that, and it was just this situation just wasn't right for him.
I will say that one thing that sort of jumps off of the Wizenhunt calling him, the buzz here, the buzz in Tampa, the buzz of the Shrine game is that Jameis is going to go 1 to the Bucs. It sounds like it's not even really being hidden at this point. So that's another one that maybe not put it in pen, but I would put it in pencil. There are some other concerns about Jameis that we could maybe talk about. I actually have a hot take saved for that later in this podcast. But Jameis, it sounds like the Bucs like him. So he might go number 1 there. It sounds like that's the buzz.
Yeah, the thing with Jameis, right, is so I don't know if you had heard the same thing, but I've talked to people who said legitimately he wanted to come back and wanted to play baseball. And he was just kind of like, tapped on the shoulder and like told like, yo, you don't need to worry about this. Like you're gonna go top 5 for sure. And then you see him rise to number 1 in all these mocks from like experts who are plugged into the league, like completely plugged into the league. And yeah, that kind of just like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess he's probably going to be the number 1 guy, and someone told him that.
Yeah, I mean, I can just say it. He does still want to play baseball. He wants to play baseball and he wants to play football. Apparently, like he thinks he can be Bo Jackson. Is sort of what was intimated. Now I'm not sure if someone is going to tell him that's not a good idea, which I think for a cornerback or a running back it's a little bit more defensible than for a quarterback, because quarterback you really need to be sort of plugged into like the system and really understanding what's going on. But I wouldn't be shocked if that's a storyline that comes up a little bit closer to the draft or even after he's picked, because it does seem to me that is something that he might want to do.
Yeah, so what I had heard this week even is that like if he goes in the first 3 rounds of baseball and he's not a day 1 starter at quarterback in the NFL, he's going to try his hand in both sports. And he's going to try to be a relief pitcher. And I really don't know that much about baseball, so I can't tell you how good of a prospect he is. But it was under my impression. I mean, I remember people last year who were saying that he was like the worst All-American that like baseball's ever had and things like that. So I kind of like asked around to those same guys, and I was like, can he actually play like above the AAA level? And they were saying that like as a relief pitcher, he probably could. So that's an interesting thing to watch because, yeah, I mean, that's a legitimate concern if your guy is like, hey, also, by the way, if when you pick me number 1, if I'm not starting day one, I'm also going to go play this other sport and not invest the time, in all sorts of stuff that like quarterbacks have to do in the off season. So yeah, I mean that's a really interesting storyline. Like I said, I think the dude's a top 5 lock at this point. And yeah, if he goes to Tampa, I mean I won't be surprised at all.
Well, while we're talking rumors, what are some of the other good rumors you heard down in Mobile, Ethan? Sorry, I'm watching the game right now, actually.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I would say the big one that I'm going to give credit to Ian Wharton because he overheard this conversation happen. Pittsburgh really likes Quentin Rollins from Miami, Ohio. Mike Tomlin's like big fan. It sounds like he could go in the first round to them. That was one of the sort of like the big rumors that I had heard. Another one is I'm not sure how comfortable Washington is with Robert Griffin III. I don't think they're going to trade him, but we'll see how that shakes out. And I mean, otherwise, like I'm trying to think back through everything. Yeah, I don't think that there were a lot of other sort of like substantial like remember this type things that I had really heard about. I think that Reggie McKenzie's a fan of Sam Brallo from Colorado State. I heard a couple of Oakland scouts saying that they're going to have to talk him out of picking him high after watching him at Senior Bowl practice. So I'm pretty sure that's something that's valid. And I guess some of the quarterbacks, I mean, Petty in the Rams, Grayson in Denver. It sounds like Denver is going to be looking for another quarterback this year. Grayson and the Texans. I think that Houston is a big fan of Garrett Grayson, so you can take that for what you will. And in terms of like visits that I saw on the field, which you shouldn't put a lot of stock into, but I guess it's good just to sort of like keep an eye on things. The Saints brought their entire staff over to talk to David Cobb after practice. And I can't say enough about the running backs for both teams, by the way. They were both awesome all week. Carolina brought their entire posse over to talk to Justin Hardy and what may make the most sense out of any pick ever. The Niners apparently really liked Quandre Diggs, who actually is a cornerback who had a really good week of practice, another one who I sort of forgot about. And I have a feeling that the Patriots are going to end up taking a guard pretty early in this draft class. They talked to TJ Clemmings, who is a candidate to move to guard at some point if a team decides to put him there. And I have a feeling they're going to love Laken Tomlinson because talking to him, he just screams Patriots. So
that's interesting you say that about Clemmings. I mean, we kind of say like guys who aren't athletically gifted, bump into guard and things like that, and that seems to work better than the guy with sloppy footwork in a phone booth. Because I think that's kind of how Clemmings would play out. I mean, we saw Lyle Collins move to guard at points this week, and he wasn't looking good at guard. I mean, Clemmings is the kind of guy that I just think you need to develop on the edge. I'm not sure he's a guy you necessarily want to kick in. I mean, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
I mean, I think either way, when you move someone to guard, offensive line coaches are probably one of the most important position coaches in the NFL. I think that offensive line development pretty much is predicated on the coach a little bit more than the physical gifts. You can take a guy late in the draft with like slightly lesser physical gifts and sort of make him a working cog. Clemmings can pull fine, and that's something that's huge in the Patriots offense. They love pulling guards. So I think that he actually could work really well in that offense as a guard. So I think it's not out of the realm of possibility. It's just something that I sort of noticed and heard about. So I think that, yeah.
I think one of the things about moving Clemmings to guard, too, that we have to consider is that would be the third position for him in a period of like 3 or 4 years. That's the guy that played defensive end his first couple of years of college and even, I think, throughout his redshirt season. So he had 2 years starting at right tackle, and then you're going to have him move again. So I kind of see, like Justice said, I think he's a guy I would want to continue to develop at that right tackle spot and keep him there.
He's a guy athletically I've fawned over before. I think when you have an athlete, a lot of times it can be easier to teach them things than as opposed to the other way where a guy struggles athletically, and then you're trying to work on tech as well with him. So I think with Clemmings, you're going to get a guy that, like Justin said, if you move him, that's 3 moves in 3 years, and if he's already sloppy, like a lot of people are saying, is it best to continue to move him from place to place? Maybe it works out. Maybe that's what he needs, is to find get into guard and just be asked to use that athleticism and go straight forward and pull and things. But it's obviously it's a question that we'll have answered as we go through here. Let's get to the guys that weren't there. Justice and Justin, I know you guys have been chomping at the bit all week on this stuff. And Ethan, if you have any, chime in whenever. But the hot takes from the Senior Bowl were scorching hot this week. Justice, you can start us off because I know you've got a plethora.
Yeah, actually, my first one from this week is I took a screen cap and I sent this out during the game because I was watching the stream. So they listed out the first round, or they called it the potential first round picks. And there's a bunch of guys that you kind of expect on there. I mean, there's like Danny Shelton, Lyle Collins, Clemmings, guys like that. Carl Davis moved up into that. And then, like, a receiver's name who I absolutely did not expect to see going there, Philip Dorsett. They had Philip Dorsett listed as a potential first-round pick. And I made a joke about, like, Davis' son is still, like, running the Raiders. But, like, who the hell is going to draft Philip Dorsett in the first round?
I don't think he goes... Oh, sorry. I don't think he goes in round 1, but he looked really good this week. His hands are underrated. He made some really, really good hands catches all week long, and the Jaguars used him everywhere. They ran with him, they pitched the ball to him, they ran laterals to him. I think he goes in the early second round. He's sort of like Brandon Cooks to me.
Wow, see, I don't think of him as like that kind of a player, because like Cooks was super dynamic. Like Cooks overshadowed Wheaton when I was watching Wheaton tape and things like that. I mean, I guess maybe it's just because he had a freshman quarterback this year. They had, they had that switch early. I mean, maybe he just needed a guy with a gun like Stephen Morris to really showcase his talent. I mean, he still had very good yards per catch numbers, but I just absolutely can't like fathom a world where he goes in the first round.
Yeah, that one really caught me off guard too, and I believe Denzel Perryman was on that list too, and that was another one that really surprised me. And Mike Mayock, with the caveat that if he runs well at the combine, that Perryman could be a first-round pick. I think that's kind of a big if. It's also you're also talking about a guy who's 5'10" and change at that inside linebacker spot, and I just wonder how just in the past couple of years, we've seen that that's not necessarily that valuable of a player for the NFL. We're not seeing guys, middle linebackers, going in the first round. We're seeing them even like it kind of reminded me of Chris Borland last year, and he goes in the third round. Yeah, he ends up being a really good player and having a great rookie year, but that one really surprised me. And I really don't think Denzel Perryman's going to run much better than like a 4.7, and that's 4'7", 5'10" and a half linebacker. I don't think that's a first-round guy.
Yeah, see, the thing about Perriman is I could totally see his like 40, or not even his 40, just like his 20 and 10 split being very good. But just everything else he's gonna look bad at. Like he's a dude who definitely has that burst, and if he can time like an A-gap blitz right, like he'll completely blow stuff up. But if you're asking him to do stuff in coverage and things like that, I mean, he's going to be a bursty type guy, but he doesn't look like an elite athlete, if that makes any sense.
I will say, I think that in general, this is a good lesson. I think people completely overestimate what a linebacker is supposed to do in coverage in the NFL. At the Senior Bowl, Perryman was just taking the guy to the flat, handing him off to the safety, and did it with regularity, did it completely fine whenever I watched him. I saw him do it on tape all the time, too. That really should probably be the most that he's used by, but a good linebacker, a starting linebacker, can totally get by doing that at the NFL, in my opinion. So I don't think it should be held against him as much as it is sometimes.
There was quite a bit of buzz about him the first, day before he got injured, correct, Ethan?
Yeah, he played well. He was playing well for me. I was a big fan of what he was doing on day one. And it's sort of like combined with the tape that I was seeing. Unfortunately, got injured after that. He did come back day 3. I didn't really see him much, but he looked good on day 1 from what I saw. And it's sort of like combined with the tape to sort of make me think that he's going to be a pretty good pro wherever he gets picked. I think that he's going to find a fit and stick there.
Justin, what was one of your hot takes that you saw this week?
Well, I can kind of combine two because let's go back to the quarterbacks. We heard Ethan, who was out to practice, we heard him talk about Bryce Petty and refer to Sean Mannion as trash. And I think that's pretty accurate. I said during the game, Mannion reminded me of Brandon Whedon with a bad arm. But the takes I saw were Petty. Blake Meek on Twitter said Petty over Brett Hundley. And then even hotter the next day was Mickey Freege. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. That's NFL Draft War Room on Twitter. And he said Sean Mannion is over Marcus Mariota. I was stunned. I haven't heard Sean Mannion mentioned in a first round type of conversation or day 1 or 2 conversation since that time when he was highly regarded by some scouting service, and that's been kind of thrown out the window. There's no way. I don't even think Sean Mannion gets drafted before maybe a late part of day 3.
Sean Mannion's like 2 years away from being Mike Glennon. Like I still don't understand it at all. You're like, man, I want to invest some time in this dude so one day he could be my backup quarterback. Like,
and I saw another one. I think Joel Klatt on Fox had Mannion as his 3rd-ranked quarterback in the draft. That was actually my hot take, so sort of stolen. But no,
the Mannion love is interesting.
Yeah, I think it's people tend to get bored. I think it's part of the reason why I'm seeing a lot of over correction on Mariota. At least from the tape that I've seen, I think people are getting bored already. And unlike last year, when at least people could sort of fall back on a Derek Carr, who was sort of a late riser, there's no one like that this year, other than maybe Hundley. And I think even people are burned out on Hundley on this point too. So they're going to go wherever they can. And we saw Brandon Bridge already, even though he's a terrible quarterback. And now people are going to Sean Mannion.
Justice is going to leave the podcast now. Oh, jeez.
I think like 70% of our hot takes this year have been either Brandon Bridge or Brett Hundley, though.
Yeah. I mean, I think, honestly, people made fun of Josh Norris for having Blake Sims as his 3rd-ranked quarterback. I think Blake Sims if he actually decides to commit to football and get into slightly better shape, and those doubts are sort of erased, I could see him being a nice value pick on day 3 for a team because I actually like a lot of his tools.
See, I thought if Bevel was gonna get a head coaching spot, he'd be a really good quarterback to mold, as a backup type that might be able to compete and be a lower level starter, because in that misdirection system, it sounds crazy to say, but he could kind of be like Russell Wilson. If you really put everything together, his peak is probably somewhere around Russell Wilson's. And you can't say that about a lot of these dudes in this class, man. We have people hype about Brian Bennett. I've seen Brian Bennett. I cut his stuff at Oregon. I saw his stuff at Southeast Louisiana, that game where literally he spent the entire first half of the game in that cut punting, and then he had that game against Tulane, which is the worst I've ever seen from a quarterback, ever. So, I don't know what to do with this class, man. I can totally see, Blake Sims is probably going to be, a top 5 quarterback for me in this class, which seems
Evan Spencer from Ohio State, who made that trick play touchdown pass against Alabama, is a better quarterback than Brian Bennett showed in that Tulane tape.
Yes. I think people are underrating Garrett Grayson a little bit, to be honest. His tape isn't that bad. It's actually got a lot better this year from last year, at least in my opinion. And I think that he's a pretty nice third-round pick if you want to groom a guy. So he's somebody who I think people should keep an eye on. Another guy who's sort of underrated right now to me is Connor Halliday because of the injury. But the dude just slings the ball everywhere, and I want a team to give him a shot. I think he's a nice guy. I want to see him get a shot. I think he has some potential.
Going back to Mannion and the take, one of the takes I've seen from people that like him and defend him is that his struggles this year were because he lost all his weapons. Isn't that a bigger indictment that he couldn't lift anybody up to kind of, I mean, because his numbers weren't even close to what they were last year, and that's kind of where my question is if you're good, don't you at least come close to those same numbers, even if you do lose some talent, Justice?
Well, I mean, kind of like he still had two decent running backs, but like not last year, but the year before. I mean, so he played with Wheaton, who I had a second round grade on, and I was a very big fan of. He played with Cooks, who ended up going in the first round, and he played with Malo at center, and he was probably the best center in college football last season. So, I mean, you lose those three guys, and yeah, it's hard to replace them. But then at the same time, like, if you can't produce without having like a clear advantage at three spots with guys who are probably going to produce at the next level, I don't know what you're doing. I'm not a very big fan of his. Like, I've said the Mike Glennon thing. I mean, he reminds me a little bit too of like Zach Menberger, like during Zach Menberger's junior year when he was like folding up his body and everything when he's throwing and stuff like that. But he doesn't have his arm. So like, I guess my question is just like, I mean, what's the end game with him, right? Like, what are you trying to get out of Sean Mannion that you couldn't get out of a street free agent?
And also, I think that it should be said, he's been beaten out by quarterbacks anytime there's been someone with even like a close experience level to him. He was beaten out by Cody Vaz a couple of years ago. He was beaten out by like Ryan Katz a couple of years ago too. And also, he had a really good tight end this year. Connor Hamlet's somebody who I actually kind of liked. So he's had talent. Victor Bolden's pretty good too. Yeah. What I saw, I don't think he's that bad. So
Ngwacha moved from receiver to pass rusher, but yeah, I mean, and he's solid running backs too.
I think that he isn't capable of sort of doing what he's supposed to do to be an NFL quarterback. And I think that you can fall in love with the arm all you want, but like we've seen this before from Oregon State, it's Derek Anderson, and he's worse than Derek Anderson, to be honest.
He doesn't have the arm, that's for sure.
Well, I'm gonna steal a take from the guys in our group text message because this one was good. Where'd it go? There's too many.
There's too many takes.
Did we talk about it last week? No, we didn't. That's right. Connor Cook. This was Justice sent this to me. Connor Cook, who didn't even come out, is a better quarterback than Marcus Mariota.
Who said that?
That's Justice on that one.
I forget. I remember the one dude. Shout outs to Jake Bryson. I did this Reddit AMA thing for the NFL Draft subreddit, and I answered probably 100 questions that they just had for me that just piled on throughout the day. And someone asked me what the hottest take ever was, and I was like, "Oh, it's Jake Bryson when he was when he said Marcus Mariota is a worse prospect coming out than Dennis Dixon. Dennis Dixon came out, and then he ended up screen capping it and was like, "This is the first thing I see. This is the first thing I see when I come see your thread." Shouts to him. That's still keeping me warm to this day.
The gentleman that said the Connor Cook thing was Falk Fans on Twitter. I'm not familiar with his work, but I found the take interesting, and Justice found it for me and sent it to me. But yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Remember, the quarterbacks are always better next year. And that's forever the truth in every draft. They're always better next year. So apparently Connor Cook's going to be better than Marcus Mariota next year.
I will say that the opinion of many in Mobile is that Tony Lippett sort of made Connor Cook look good. I was talking to somebody, I do not remember who it was, but they were saying that when they watched Tony Lippett this year, they thought Tony Lippett was a freshman because of how transformed he was from the year in 2013 to 2014. He didn't have a great week because I don't think that he's really made to succeed in Mobile, but he's gonna be a really good pro and he's gonna be a wide receiver, regardless of what you hear. He has told me, his agent has told me, wide receiver. He's a wide receiver. Done. Not a quarterback.
Any other hot takes, Justice?
Yeah, a very, very hot take from one Bob Kravitz in Indianapolis. He said, if Bob Kraft is a true man of integrity, he will take it out of the league's hands and fire Belichick. Not holding my breath. So there you go, Bob Kraft. This dude in Indianapolis, this sports writer in Indianapolis. If you want to be a man to him, you got to fire Bill Belichick.
That's right. Fire the most successful coach of the modern era. Do it. I mean, the 49ers fired Harbaugh, but he's no Belichick. He's just a douche.
Can you say that on this podcast?
Oh yeah,
he broke my heart in 2 playoff games running that damn zone read that Seattle did. You can say whatever about that man that you want here.
Yeah, the thing about, I will say, one of the most interesting things about sort of like going to the Senior Bowl that I recommend to everyone is sort of like you get to learn like how the media works, like the real NFL media, how they operate. And Glazer is no exception to that rule. That guy was literally like hugging the entire San Francisco 49ers scouting staff the entire time that I saw him at like the local bar. He builds relationships, very close relationships with a lot of these people. And, you know, the Harbaugh thing, I mean, it was one of those situations, I think that someone had mentioned it, how like Florida went after McElwain. They made it so awkward that he had to leave. And that was definitely propagated by a lot of the scouting staff that I don't think liked Jim Harbaugh very much, or were put up to it by somebody who also wanted Harbaugh to leave San Francisco.
Justin, what about you?
I wanted to go back to Marcus Mariota, and the word came out yesterday that, see, you already know what I'm going to say. The word came out yesterday that he was probably not going to throw at the Combine. And that's like chum in the ocean to the Sharks, because it's immediately, you got to question his competitiveness. You got to, you know, it's not as though this guy has 40-some games of tape, including a recent college football playoff. We want to see him throw at the Combine so we can prove his competitiveness. And immediately, there were a couple guys on Twitter, most notably our good friend Ben Albright, who's very big on everybody competing at any moment that they possibly can, and Michael Shoddy of Bleacher Report, both kind of jumped on the opportunity to criticize anybody who would, and I don't think they specifically mentioned Mariota, but just anybody who wouldn't throw at the Combine. It's not new. This is something that gets criticized year in, year out. I just found it funny this time because it wasn't more than 5-10 minutes later that we find out that it's probably because he's got an injury to his shoulder. So I just want to caution people out there. Yes, we all want these guys to compete. I think Shoddy's tweet said something about not worried about competition or something, said no coach ever. Well, let's not get carried away here. If the guy's hurt, he's hurt. And if you don't think he's hurt, then he's a liar, and you don't want to draft him anyway. So I just don't – I don't care if these guys throw at the Combine or not. I really don't. A guy like Garrett Grayson, it might be beneficial to. A guy like Marcus Mariota, I don't think it's going to shift one way or the other. The Senior Bowl may have a little bit, but I really don't think, especially if the guy's hurt, you don't want him going out there getting and re-aggravating that thing.
Plus, Dan LeFavor once skipped out on throwing at the combine.
And
Yeah.
we see how that
Dan
worked out for
LeFavor.
him.
Now that might have been bad. But I don't think Marcus Mariota's hiding anything here. I mean, like Justice said earlier in the show, if he's not throwing, it's because he's got a legitimate injury, and it's an injury that we pretty much saw happen. So, you know, I just found it really funny. It's just always funny when people jump the gun and assume the worst about somebody's personality rather than maybe thinking about the other circumstances.
I actually have a question for y'all. I'm seeing a lot of criticisms about Mariota that really remind me of sort of what was said about Teddy last year. And I just need to sort of call it what it is. I'm seeing a lot of the quiet thing. I'm seeing a lot of like the non-competitive thing. I'm seeing questions about the arm. Just sort of like, I'm still like trying to figure out how to value them, because last year I was not a fan of Mariota. I think he actually improved a lot this year from what I saw. But what exactly separates Mariota and Teddy from being prospects, other than the fact that Teddy played in an offense where he took the ball from center?
I think people would say Teddy has more NFL-style reads and that he's better at stepping up in the pocket. But, I mean, yeah, I mean, they wrote articles about this in September, dude. Like I think who was it? I think it was Sports Illustrated wrote about this in September, where they were like, "Yep, he's getting like all this quiet stuff. Like, watch for the drop. Like, this is gonna happen. Like, this is kind of something that's just like been known. You know what I mean? Like, it's that whole like the process and things like that, where it's like you kind of know who Mariota is a person like through his like interviews with people around him, and like how his coaches talk about him. You see how he plays, and you're just like, oh yeah, okay, like a slip is going to happen at some point, even if it shouldn't.
The big thing that I just don't understand, and I like James as a prospect still because his 2013 was so good, but like even if he plays in a slightly more pro-style system than Mariota does, he still made some awful reads last year and threw a lot of interceptions. His interception percentage was one of the highest that I've charted in the past 6 years. I'm working on a quarterback metric right now, and his year this year, like if you look at it like in historical context, there are not many quarterbacks who've had as bad a year before coming out for the draft as James has had and still being good quarterbacks in the NFL. Like, I'm actually going to take, I could probably take a quick look at it right now, but it's just sort of like, I mean, if it's 2013 if he had come out, and I think that's why people are buying into that upside, then he would totally be like a viable NFL quarterback. But what happened this year, other than Kelvin Benjamin leaving, that sort of made him regress so much? Because he regressed, in my opinion.
Well, I think one thing that happened is, I mean, you saw like Oklahoma State out the jump, just tee off on him in underneath coverage. I mean, that dude Ogba, like kind of blew up off of one game because he just dominated. You know, he was just picking apart. He was just like following Jameis's eyes. I'm tracking this ball because I know exactly where it's gonna go. They had the boundary cornerbacks, off the receiver, and they would just have them like instantly break because they knew Jameis would check out and go to that every single time. I think a lot of his struggles are like underneath coverage, and then the other part is just not recognizing blitz. I mean, I think it was the Notre Dame game. I sent a screen cap of it out when like his running back like literally was like doing jumping jacks. Like the dude was like jumping up and down, and Jameis was like, "I'm gonna throw it into double coverage deep," and ends up throwing a pick. I was like, "Oh man, yeah." I just think it's that. I mean, really, when you're as far as you're talking about like narratives on these quarterbacks like coming out, like I can't think of a better comparison than like Eli and Jameis, and then Tannehill and Mariota, because that kind of seems like how we're treating them and like the style of play, if nothing else, of them going to be at the next level. I think Mariota's more of like a function of the offense type of guy, where like Jameis will either make you or kill you. Like he's going to do one of them, and it's probably not going to be consistent from even like a game-to-game standpoint. Like it's going to be some streaky play.
Yeah, we saw it this year. It's from half to half with Jameis.
Yeah.
But I think what people are in love with is, he's got the stature, he's got the arm that just the ball just kind of jumps. It looks effortless, and I think some of the issues with Marcus are that he's waiting. He's a guy. I think Greg Cassell talked about it, and I don't treat him as gospel, but he's a guy. Mariota's a player who throws to open guys instead of throwing guys open, and I think that's one of the issues that people have. And I think my issue with him, with Marcus Mariota, is just that I think it's going to take him a little bit longer to develop than people are really than some people really want to admit right now.
Yeah, and I think Cosell's type of quarterback, I don't think he's a fan of mobile guys. Like, I think didn't he have Mettenberger like as second quarterback or something this past year? He wasn't really an RG3 guy. He's not really a cam guy as far as like an NFL player. So it's not his type. I mean, everyone has their own personal biases. I think, they look for certain things in quarterbacks, and it doesn't seem like, Mariota is definitely not up Cosell's alley at this point, whereas Jameis definitely is.
All right, guys. Anything else on the draft before we get to everybody's Super Bowl prediction?
There's one thing. The play the draft. That game that they have set up. I think it's even like Kuiper affiliated. I think we did this a little bit last year, where it was like it's kind of like a stock market. So like you kind of like buy into stock on players you think are going to rise and things like that. I talked to the owner of the site. It was supposed to drop. It was supposed to. This year's version was supposed to drop today because they need to put in all the underclassmen in, so you can't start it until at least the 15th. It's supposed to start today. Apparently, it's coming out on Wednesday. So I'm gonna see if we could try to make like a little like group thing for us and the people who watch our show, so we can see how we would rank against each other on as far draft stuff. The invisible hand, all that stuff.
Yeah,
Very
I just
nice.
sort of wanted. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I just wanted to sort of say, like, closing out the Jameis talk. I just pulled up my stats. Jameis has the second highest interception percentage of any quarterback drafted in the past 6 years. In the year before he got drafted, at 3.85% of his passes being intercepted. The only one higher was Matt Barkley in 2013 at 3.88%. So just another sort of like thing to think about when you're evaluating Jameis.
And it's funny because both of you have said on the show, I mean, just today, that he's a lock to go in the first round. So,
Yeah.
I mean, and I think you both said top 5. So, it just shows you that a lot of times those trends, well, obviously we're 3 months away, but those trends can be overlooked if a guy has the potential that that teams covet. So, all right, guys, let's. We know who Ethan's picking, but Ethan, give us a score in this game.
I'm gonna actually. I'm gonna stand strong as a Patriots fan. I was scared of the Packers, to be honest. I think that right now we're seeing the NFC as like a wonderful sort of like a river of karma. Because the Lions should not have beaten the Cowboys should not have beaten the Lions. And the Packers should not have beaten the Cowboys because that was a freaking catch. And the Seahawks should not have beaten the Packers. So I think what we're going to see is the Patriots in a close game beating the Seahawks. I'm going to go 21-18 just to make the numbers a little bit weird.
Justin, Justice, and I don't care about this game, but it is the Super Bowl, so we'll make predictions. Justin, what do you got here?
Yeah, I just predict that we're all going to win when all this ball deflation nonsense finally ends and they play this game, because I thought, it would have ended about 6 days ago, and it's still going on. I bet if we check Twitter right now, there are people arguing about this, but the game, I'm going to stick with Seattle. I thought they would repeat all along. I think I don't even know how close it's going to be, but let's say I'm going to go 35-21 Seahawks win, and then people will forget about this ball deflation and they'll move on to hating Richard Sherman for his post-game interview.
And we'll get to start moving Marcus Mariota down the draft board even more. So, speaking of which, hey, Justice, how's it going?
I'm doing all right. I got the Seahawks pick in 32. There is no God, so the Seahawks are just gonna win infinitely until Russell Wilson gets the largest contract in the NFL. As Chaps likes to say, he wants Tom Brady to lose another Super Bowl so he can beat Jim Kelly and Joe Montana at the same time. Um, there's like I don't know which way the karma swings on this one, right? Like the Seahawks are like the bad boys up until they go against the Patriots, and then it's a completely role reversal. I mean, really, I think it was who was it? I think it was the Grantland guys who were talking. No, it was Levitard who was talking about how people should really be talking about the running backs going head to head in this game, because you have Blunt, who's like biggest, he's most known for either punching a dude in the face or getting pulled over and having weed on him driving to the airport on the way to a football game. He quit on his team halfway through the season. He's now the starting running back for the Patriots. And then you have Marshawn Lynch, who like ghost rode an injury cart at the University of California. His favorite, his favorite book is Cat in the Hat. Like he eats Skittles and he grabs his nuts on the sideline and he doesn't talk to reporters at all. Just like the head to head of these two running backs going against each other, man. It's too much. It's too much.
This will be Brady's fourth Super Bowl loss, if they lose, or will it be his third?
Well, we gotta ask Ethan about
It'll
this
be
one,
his
right?
third. If he loses, it'll be his third, and his third in Arizona, no less. I will
All right.
say, I think people are underrating the Patriots' defense a little bit. This is the best defense the Patriots have had since 2004.
Since they carried Tom Brady the first 3 times? No.
Exactly. No, exactly. You need the defense to help carry the quarterback. It's part of the entire conversation. I have a feeling that Jamie Collins has a really, really good game. But I'm Jamie Collins. He's my favorite. So.
Well, and the Cardinals picked Kevin Minter before Jamie Collins, so that just that's what I have to deal with at night. So I'm gonna go Seahawks. I think it's a close game. I think it's gonna be like 17-14. I think it could really go either way. But I think Gostkowski misses the field goal, and so Brady ends up losing thanks to his kicker instead of winning thanks to his kicker. That's how I'll say this one. Parting shots as we head out, Ethan. Thanks for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Oh no, thank you for having me. Yeah, I would totally recommend, if you haven't gone to Mobile and you're part of draft Twitter or just like the draft or just want to meet NFL people. Everyone there was really nice who I met in draft Twitter. Shout out to Jeff Risden, Dan Hope, Luke Inman, Emery Hunt, who was awesome. Everyone else who was there, who was really cool. Who I forgot, Brian Perez, Luke Easterling. They're all really cool people. Yeah, it was a cool experience. I would totally do it again, and hopefully I'll see y'all down there next year.
We're gonna get Ames to pay for us to go down next year, and we'll do a Savage podcast every night from the field. Justin, anything as we head out?
No, I just want to thank Ethan for being on the show. You guys, everyone out there, follow him at Ethan Ham with 2 M's like John Ham. And then I want to remind everybody, as always, that we're on iTunes. So subscribe to the Draft Savages podcast. If you don't have iTunes, we're on Stitcher. And you can find the RSS feed on footballsavages.com. And as soon as we get off the air, I'm going to look up and see if there is a prop bet on whether or not Marshawn holds his dick this week. And I'm going to put money on it.
Justice, final thought, man.
Just thanks to everyone who's like subscribing and stuff. I mean, I'm seeing this, like I haven't looked at the numbers, but I'm seeing on like social media more and more people talk about this. So like tell a friend to tell a friend, like link our stuff, retweet us, just help this like little build a bit. We'd like to get a lot, like give us feedback if we're terrible, tell us we're terrible. Yeah, I'm going to Vegas on Friday with Hawks and Eric. So like I'm probably gonna die at some point. So I mean, just bless this podcast if I'm not here on Monday, because there's a legitimate shot of that happening.
have your mom send me one of the pictures in the background, and I'll hang it behind me for the next podcast if you're
Okay.
if you're not able to make it. So, all right, guys, thanks for joining us, Ethan, Justin, Justice. Thanks as always. We'll do it again next week, and we'll start our positional previews with a look at quarterbacks from Derek Clausen of Football Savages. So it'll be a good time. So thank you, guys.
Good night.